Thank you, Carolyn. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the AGM. During the course of the morning, as you are listening to the presentations and so on, feel free to go get coffee or breakfast, whatever you want. This is an informal event, so yeah, just feel free to do that for sure. So welcome to the AGM here in Regina. This is without question one of our most important accountability events that we do at the WCB. And we thank you for coming and showing your interest in everything that we do here this morning. Our agenda today is meant to give you a high-level overview of the 2018 results. More in-depth information is available online or in our annual report. At the end of the session, as usual, we'll have time for you to ask questions. And in just a few minutes, our CEO and our CFO and other VPs will be here to give their presentation. But it is indeed my privilege to address you this morning as chair of the WCB. I am joined this morning with my colleagues, Larry Flowers and Gary Hamblin. Larry, give a wave. Yeah, thank you. And as you know, we're here this morning to share our results from 2018 as well as our plans for the future. The Workers' Compensation Act 2013 governs our actions as a board. The WCB has exclusive jurisdiction in Saskatchewan, and we are an independent board fully funded by our employee premiums and investment income. As stewards of the workers' compensation system in the province, and we take this job very seriously, it is our vision at the WCB to eliminate injuries and restore abilities. We will continue to work to achieve our vision through our mission, which is to be a customer-centric organization that continuously seeks to add value for our customers through a culture of continuous process improvement. The workers' compensation system in Canada, as we know it, has been established through something known as the Meredith Principles. These principles were adopted over 100 years ago, 1913 to be exact, and I believe they are still as relevant today as they were 106 years ago. Reflecting on something known as the historic compromise, the Meredith Principles provide for an employer-funded compensation system in exchange for which the workers give up their right to sue. The principles stipulate that WCB will provide no-fault, mandatory insurance coverage to protect workers from wage loss. Through this no-fault system, employers are protected from legal action arising from a workplace injury and collectively fund the compensation system. We remain entirely committed to the Meredith Principles that protect families, employers, and entire communities. All of us here representing the Saskatchewan WCB are extraordinarily proud to be able to help injured workers, their families, and employers when they are affected by a workplace injury. The following video gives an excellent history of the compensation system in Canada.
Today begins like any other day. You get up at 6 a.m., have a coffee,
Hey guys, I gotta go.
Okay, bye.
kiss your wife and son goodbye, and sprint out the door. You might build homes in the construction industry, work in a warehouse, fall trees in the forests, work as a roofer, or be a residential handyman. But today isn't like any other day. You wake up in hospital, and the diagnosis is bleak. And your future is even bleaker. You have no medical insurance, and you can no longer do your job. Your dreams of a future for you and your family are over. If you think this scenario is fiction, you'd be wrong. At the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, drawn from the countryside and overseas, workers toiled in factories, mines, railways, and forests. Lured by the promise of jobs and better lives for their families, they endured grueling physical labor and dangerous working conditions. Death and injury were an accepted part of the job. For those seeking compensation, there was only one option: sue your employer. But lawsuits could take years, and most workers simply couldn't afford them. By the early 1900s, things started to change. Provincial governments turned their attention to working conditions and the alarming number of deaths and injuries in Canada's workplaces. The Ontario government appointed Sir William Meredith, an esteemed lawyer and politician, to study workers' compensation systems around the world and make recommendations to improve conditions. In 1913, Meredith crafted a made-in-Canada workers' compensation model designed to protect workers and employers alike. Under his plan, workers would be eligible for medical and wage loss benefits from a system funded entirely by employers. In exchange, employers would be freed from legal liability. Meredith called it the Historic Compromise. And soon, jurisdictions across Canada adopted his model. The workers' compensation system has evolved since Meredith first penned his report. But many of the principles set out more than 100 years ago have been embraced by agencies around the world. Collective liability, a no-fault system, security of payment, exclusive jurisdiction, and an independent board. Today, all across Canada, compensation boards cover the country's working population. Workers' compensation is embedded into Canadian society, helping to ensure we all enjoy and maintain a standard of living that's envied around the world. Whether you're a worker, a supervisor, or a business owner, you have the peace of mind of knowing you'll be protected if you're hurt on the job or if one of your employees is injured. In a testament to Sir William Meredith, the Historic Compromise has stood the test of time.
I trust you enjoyed that and got something from it. I always like at this point in time to delve into a little bit of personal history. This chair has not always been in a suit and tie. I remember fondly or otherwise where I actually lied about my age so I could get to work in a meatpacking plant in the province here, many years ago, of course. And because of that, I had a great job earning $1.95 an hour, I believe it was at the time. And in payment for lying about my age to get that job, I still have injuries from those years that I worked in a meatpacking plant that haunt me to this day, which speaks to the fact that it could never get to be a rider. So thank you for that. Here are a few of the highlights from our year. At 115.2%, we remain fully funded with the ability to cover the future costs of all claims in the system. As our labor force has grown over the past decade, workplace safety becomes more and more vital for Saskatchewan as we realize our economic growth potential. It remains important for us to keep a solid funding position to ensure benefits and programs for injured workers are never at risk. As well, employers can be sure that they will be protected from lawsuits and that they will continue to have an effective, efficient compensation system. In 2018, we've been able to offer our lowest average premium rate in over 3 decades. Our average premium rate dropped for the 11th straight year in 2018 to $1.19. Our 2018 rate was the 3rd lowest in Canada. In October, we announced the 2019 premium rate at $1.17, which, as I mentioned, is the 3rd lowest in Canada. Manitoba's at 95 and Alberta at $1.08, the only 2 that are lower than we are. And over the last 3 years, as I mentioned again, we've had the 3rd lowest premium rate in Canada. New Brunswick increased from $1.48 in 2017 to $1.70 in 2018, and then to $2.65 this year. Ontario decreased from $2.35 in 2018 to $1.65 in 2019. Given the full implementation of the enhanced rate model, which strives to be fair, predictable, and transparent, and a continuing commitment to injury prevention, the average premium rate for 2019 dropped by 1.7% to $1.17. Our rates continue to decrease because you are investing time and money into preventing injuries. Injured workers and employers are cooperating in return-to-work plans. In 2018, 88% of employers achieved Mission Zero. This means that 88% of the 49,000 employers in Saskatchewan did not report any workplace injuries. This is a huge success and a testament to the work being done by employers in our province. Back in 2008, Saskatchewan had the 2nd highest workplace injury rate in Canada. Now, thanks to the health and safety efforts of people like you, workers and employers, our workplace injury rate is the 5th highest in the country. So from 2nd to 5th, that's an improvement, of course. This suggests that we will still have a great deal of work to do, but it shows that we are moving in the right direction. While we've seen a decade of improvement, the challenge for us all is to continue to keep our injury rates declining. Sadly, though, in 2018, our time loss injury rate actually increased to 1.99% compared to 1.86% the previous year, 2017. And the workplace total injury rate increased from 5.25% in 2017 to 5.44% last year, 2018. This is concerning, and this is a development that we must address immediately. It will mean continuing working together to keep our workplaces safe. But most alarming in 2018 is the number of workplace fatalities. Sadly, we lost 48 individuals in workplace fatalities last year, 20 from occupational disease and 28 from traumatic events. And I just don't want to brush over that in my speaking notes. I think we all have to take a moment and think. 48 people went to work and died. 1 is too many, but 48, my goodness. So that's a very, very sobering thought. And for someone like myself, who was at one time a laborer, this hits really close to home. Evidence from the International Social Security Association indicates that a focus on serious injuries and fatalities should improve the overall level of safety in the province. We will continue to focus on serious injury and fatality initiatives as a top priority in 2019. Our system is sustainable and constantly improving because of the fact that we all work together. Thank you, sincerely, from the board and the executive. Thank you for your interest in our results and for taking the time to be here today. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This morning, our CEO, Peter Federico, and his executive team will provide you with more details of our 2018 results. As I mentioned previously, we'll end the morning with a question and answer session that's open to everyone who's attending, and we also have people who are joining us online this morning. We are a rural province, and we are constantly working to increase accessibility to our public meetings, and that's why we have this webinar situated today. So with that, I say on behalf of the board, welcome. Thank you for being here this morning. Thank you for showing an interest, and I know that you'll enjoy the presentations that are to follow. So again, thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for that warm introduction, Gord. And of course, it probably wouldn't have been too obvious to you, but Gord actually pulled a Federico this morning. He went off script, and I was the guy that was advancing the slides. I had no idea where the heck he was because he kept moving from one to the other. So thank you very much for that. I now know what it feels like on the other side. Good morning, everyone. Very nice to see you all here, and thank you for coming and showing an interest in our results and this system. I'm joined here this morning, as Gord indicated, by my vice presidents, the executives. We've got Stuart Cunningham over here, who's the Vice President of Human Resources and Communications. Philip Germain, the Vice President of Prevention and Employer Services, soon to be the next CEO. Ann Schultz, who's our Chief Financial Officer. Mick Williams, our Vice President of Operations, which is the claims side. And Claude Blanca, our Vice President of Administration and Process Improvement. So it truly is my pleasure to be here, albeit my last annual general meeting here in Regina, to welcome you this morning and kind of kick things off before I turn it over to the vice presidents, who will really get into the details of our results, and then I'll come back and wind up with kind of a future outlook for the organization. So things that we do at the administrative level really stem from the strategic plan that the board provides to us. The strategic plan starts off by stating what the ultimate purpose or vision of our organization is. And I shared with you last year the change that was made to the vision statement to really simplify and clarify what we believe our purpose as an organization is. And our simply stated, we are here to eliminate injuries and restore people's abilities. So we want to do everything we can, first and foremost, to help prevent injuries from happening. But in the event that they do, we want to do everything that we possibly can to restore that individual's abilities to function, including their ability to return to work. The mission statement for our organization dictates how it is we are to proceed with achieving the vision for our organization. And the board has asked us to follow the path stated in our mission statement, which is to be a customer-centric organization, which means we always put the customer perspective first and take into account what would the customer actually value, what does the customer actually need, what are the gaps that we have within the services we currently provide that are not satisfying the customer needs. So we'll be customer-centric, continuously seeking to add value for our customers through a culture of continuous process improvement. So the board has challenged us to look at our internal processes, put the perspective of the customer first, and look for opportunities to improve those processes so that additional value can be provided for the customers that we serve. Of course, a strategic plan is nothing without actually the pursuit of some results. Our results are stated at the strategic level in something that we call our true north. In prior years, we called it our corporate beliefs. But our belief is if we pursue improving these 5 metrics, the people, the mission zero, financial, timeliness, and quality, we will actually enhance the customer experience. Later on, when I get into kind of the outlook and what our plans are for 2019, I'll dive a little deeper in terms of how we have now distilled from the strategic level down to more operational objectives in terms of the pursuit of our vision and mission and these true north metrics. We believe all of these are critically important to improving the experience of our customers. We believe that our people look to the leadership of our organization to provide them with a healthy and engaging environment, because our belief is that healthy and safe employees are in a better position to serve our customers. We believe from a Mission Zero perspective that all injuries are predictable and preventable, and there's no other number other than 0. We believe that you, our customers, look to us to assist you in elimination of injuries within your workplaces. And we believe that our employees deserve to work in an injury-free workplace. From a financial perspective, we believe that our customers look for us to deliver value through the services that we provide. And to have a system that never puts into question our ability to provide for those who are injured on the job. So to meet our obligations today and well into the future, we believe that our customers expect us and deserve to have us provide our services to them when they need it the most. From a timeliness perspective, we want to ensure that we're providing services when it's important for those services to be provided. And from a quality perspective, we believe that our customers, that you, our customers, expect us to provide defect-free service. Attached to each of these 5 True North metrics are aspirational goals. And being an aspirational goal, we don't expect to actually achieve these anytime soon. From a people perspective, our aspirational goal is to have 100% engagement of our staff. From a Mission Zero perspective, I've already said this, 0 injuries, both externally and internally. From a financial perspective, we want to provide 100% value all the time. From a customer perspective, we want no customers waiting, no delays in our services. And from a quality perspective, it's really about 0 errors. Now, will we achieve these anytime soon? Likely not. But we continue to aspire to achieve these True North metrics, to improve the experience of our customers. And as I get further on into the presentation, I will show you how we've broken those True North metrics down into strategic objectives that we will pursue over the next 3 years. So I'll come back to you later at the end. In the meantime, I'm going to turn it over, I think, to Phil.
Good morning, everyone. As Peter and Gord said, my name is Philip Germain. I'm the Vice President of Prevention and Employer Services, and I'll give you kind of a high-level overview of what we experienced in those 2 areas. So from an employer services perspective, this is the area of the business, for those that are not certain. We do the classification, experience rating. We educate employers on the rate model structure. We register employers. We kind of confirm their payroll, we confirm their payroll, assess their premiums, and then accept payments. So it's all those basic pieces of interacting with the customer related to their premiums. Are they classified properly? Are they registered? Are they paying the right level of premiums? And then clearances and making sure that every claim that's registered with WCB is confirmed to be connected to a registered employer within WCB. So that's the work that we do on a day-to-day basis. It's a high volume of work, as you can see from the numbers up here. We have almost 50,000 accounts. That's grown over the last few years from, I think, 2-3 years ago, we were at about 45,000. It's almost at 50,000. So we get about 10,000 interactions with employers around registrations. Roughly half of those are cancellations or reconfigurations, kind of a re-registration as a new or a different company. About 5,000 were just brand new registrations a year, roughly, give or take. Part of confirming that employers are paying the proper premiums is we do payroll audits. We go out and meet with employers. Sometimes they send us in the information and review it. Roughly about 33% of those payroll audits result in some kind of rebate back to the employer or credit because they've actually overpaid us. They've given us the wrong payroll information. About 33% are situations where the employer actually gets not a surcharge, but additional premiums because they haven't reported the right amount of payroll. And about 33% there's no change. So we do roughly between 700 to 900 payroll audits a year just to go out and confirm that employers are accurately reporting the payroll and kind of paying their fair share, no more, no less. As you can see, we've increased our active online accounts, which enables employers kind of 24/7 access to some of the services as it relates to understanding what their premiums are, paying their premiums, getting that basic information. So it's allowing employers to more and more employers to interact with us when they want as it relates to these services. And you can see we do a lot of clearances. Those are activities where we make sure that when you're hiring another business that they actually have WCB coverage, because if they should have been registered with us but they're not and there's an injury, there's a chance that you as the organization hiring them may end up taking on that claim. In addition, in 2018, some of the other things Employer Services did is we spent a lot of time interacting with the taxi industry, trying to confirm how taxi drivers can be registered, whether they're independent workers, whether they're not. That's another bucket of work that we've been doing, is going through the whole definition and looking at the definition of what is an independent worker, what's an employee, what's the difference. Those are all sometimes difficult circumstances depending on the way organizations get structured. And we need to sort through this. So we're trying to work to try and create more clarity for employers, and in particular in 2018 with the taxi industry. One of the other things that we focused on over the last few years, if you go back to 2015, 2016, we were focused on improving the registration process for employers. Back in 2014, 2015, we had a service standard of 10 days. Over 14, 15, and 16, we got that up to about 80% of employers being registered within 10 days. So we improved the service standard to 5 days. In 2017, I reported to you that we were registering about 54% of employers within 5 days. By the end of 2018, we got to 70% of employers were being registered within 5 days. And we'll keep working on that. Our ultimate goal is to get it down to 3 days and then within 24 hours. So we'll keep plugging away at those pieces. On the injury prevention front, as Gord has already alluded to, it wasn't the best year provincially on the injury prevention front. No time loss injuries were down slightly, but time loss injuries were up, fatalities were way up. And it's speaking to the fact, and we've been talking about this, I think, at the AGM and different public, that we've been getting this sense that our injury prevention efforts are plateauing. Something is not quite working the way we want it to, and certainly when it comes to further analysis we've done around serious injuries and fatalities, those buckets of injuries are not going. We typically have about 3,000 serious injuries a year, and that number has been pretty steady over the last 5 to 10 years. So we do have work, as Gord indicated, we do have work to do to figure out why the numbers of serious injuries and fatalities are remaining so high. a lot of the research we've done in the background is that if we can tackle some of the root causes of serious injuries and fatalities, it's actually going to cause all injury levels to go down. So we are very focused on a number of key issues related to fatalities and serious injuries. In particular, the occupational disease around exposure to asbestos, still ongoing. Firefighter cancers are increasing. Falls from heights, on the traumatic side, falls from heights in motor vehicle accidents are typically driving fatalities. And I'll get into that a little bit more. But what we've seen, and this next slide kind of bears it out, is you can see the trend line over time. As Gord said, we've gone from second worst in the country to fifth worst. That is progress, and that's progress that industry, employers and workers have made. And we believe we've had a small contribution, but at the end of the day, it's you, the employers and workers of this province, who have made this difference. But we are seeing a flattening out. And we started to recognize it last year, and it certainly happened to the point where we had an increase in both our time loss and total injury rate. So we need to continue to work on some of the new strategies that are already in the pipeline that we're working on. We are coming out, and we've been consulting with different employer and labor groups on what else can we do in order to make a difference and get these numbers going back down quickly. So in the workplace fatality, just a bit more detail in that regard. Gord talked about 20 occupational disease-related fatalities and 28 traumatic-related fatalities. The way that breaks down in this chart kind of gives a little bit more detail, but it was 13 asbestos-related fatalities, 6 firefighter-related cancers, and there was one mining-related cancer which is connected to exposure to fly ash. On the traumatic side, we had an assault that resulted in a fatality, carbon monoxide poisoning, people caught in equipment, crushed by equipment. There was a person fatally injured due to an electrocution. 3 workers died due to falls from heights. There was a shooting. One individual passed away because something fell on them. They were hit by a falling object. One person was struck by a motor vehicle. In the motor vehicle category, obviously, we're all fully aware of what happened with the bus crash related to Humboldt, but there were 10 motor vehicle-related, specifically motor vehicle-related fatalities. 8 of them were in vehicles. One was an aircraft-related fatality, and one was a snowmobile-related fatality. In addition, we had 4 heart attacks that were work-related and 2 work-related suicides. So that makes up the 48, and you can see that's a wide range of causes. And while all of those are important, and at the end of the day, we're trying to help employers and workers deal with all of these root causes. In particular, we're looking at how to help employers. I'll get into it here in a second. How do we deal with some of these things? And WorkSafe takes we have a 4-pillar approach. There's 4 pillars to all our strategies. And we think all of those pillars need to be functioning in order to help employers and workers and industry associations and labor really at the end of the day get out and help make a difference. The awareness campaigns, the 4 pillars: awareness campaigns, education and training, targeting initiatives, and then partnerships and leadership. Last year, we invested over $3 million in WorkSafe. That's over and above the investments by Labor Relations and Workplace Safety. That's over the investments of the safety associations. And the awareness campaigns, hopefully some or most of you, if not all of you, have seen many of the campaigns. We were on radio, TV, online, print. Our campaign surveys tell us that 80% of the working population in Saskatchewan have seen our ads, recognize our ads, and over 80% of the population in the province support us continuing to create awareness around this important issue. So we've got high recognition. We're out there. We're being visible, and we'll keep trying to create awareness. Some of the specific issues that we were trying to create awareness on were asbestos exposure. Our belief is a lot of the people that built the buildings that have asbestos are not the people who are in renovating. So many people who work in and around asbestos today may not even know it. So creating awareness about what is asbestos, where can it be found, what does it look like, how do you potentially deal with it? Creating all that awareness so that we can get people thinking more that asbestos is still a hazard today. On the education and training side, we trained over 28,000 workers last year simply through WorkSafe. Over 4,200 came to our classroom presentations, courses, and over 24,000 online. Last year, we added a number of online courses that employers and workers took advantage of. Most of those were related to mental health, violence in the workplace, and bullying, and we got a lot of uptake on those new courses. In addition, we partnered with the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce to do a number of sessions on cannabis, the new legislation that was coming in around cannabis in the workplace. Those were very well attended and well received. So we reached a lot of workers and employers last year. That 28,000 over 28,000 in 2018. We had just under 11,000 in 2017. So that was a significant increase. On the targeting front, we continue to target employers with high numbers or high injury rates. We continue to interact with the residential construction industry on falls, manufacturing related to ergonomics and hand injuries. In healthcare, we were working very closely with the Safety Association, different associations across the province, as well as the new Saskatchewan Health Authority on revisiting all our strategies and thinking about what can or should we be doing differently. We've seen an increase in 2018 in the injury rate in healthcare. Everybody was recognizing it. Everybody sees it as unacceptable, and we are working together to try and turn that trend around, as well as many youth initiatives. We've partnered with the Safety Council, Saskatchewan Safety Council, who now offers free training to all youth going into workplaces. So they will get an orientation to the best of the Safety Council's abilities with some of their limited resources, but they've committed to provide free training to all youth in Saskatchewan, and they're doing a phenomenal job, as well as our partnership with Service Hospitality on creating awareness about the importance of youth injury prevention. On the partnership side, and I've already talked about many of them, some of the new, in 2017 we had 47 partnerships. In 2018 that was up to 49. Some partnerships ended and new ones came on. Some of the new ones that were coming on were partnerships with the Saskatchewan Trucking Association and SGI to try and help us collectively work together to reduce motor vehicle related crashes. We've created a new partnership with the Saskatchewan Association for Safe Workplaces and Health to provide assistance to the education industry on developing and implementing injury prevention strategies. And most recently, we've been working a lot with the fire chiefs and the fire halls to try and raise awareness about practices that would prevent cancer related illnesses in the industry. In 2018, or actually in 2019, we got awarded, one of our partnerships is with Threads of Life, which works with seriously injured, families of seriously injured people or people who've died as a work-related injury. And Threads of Life awarded the Saskatchewan WCB with one of their awards for all the work that we do to try and help families deal with issues related to seriously injured workers and fatalities. So we were honored to accept that from Threads of Life in 2019 for 2018. So I want to just show you a quick clip of one of the new resources I talked about trying to create awareness around asbestos. Here's an example.
In 1979, my dad put a new addition on my grandparents' old 1950s home. And essentially because I was there all the time, I crawled around in the dust and fingers went to mouth. And unfortunately, I swallowed inadvertently swallowing tiny asbestos fibers. And about 35 years later, my worst nightmare came true. I was diagnosed pretty much end stage 4 peritoneal mesothelioma.
My cousin wasn't only my cousin, he was my best friend. And unfortunately, he's not around anymore due to the effects of asbestos had on him with the cleanup process with the company he worked for. We all had concerns, even though a lot of them wore masks and stuff. Problem is it sticks to your lungs and it causes havoc. Like a lot of times we don't realize how easy we can come in contact with something.
I am palliative. Anybody that is diagnosed with mesothelioma is considered palliative. I guess every side effect that could hit you out of chemo hit me. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I ended up in the hospital after every chemo treatment, having to have blood transfusions, and the nausea was really bad. So my younger son, he took it rather hard, actually. I remember looking at him and saying, you know what? If mom could save just one life, I said, then mom's done her job. I said, and that's all that matters. You know, he doesn't see it that way. His reality is, you're taking my mom and it's not right. So he carries a lot of hurt.
You guys are doing a great job actually wanting to get this known out there to the public, because I've never known of anybody in the position doing what you guys are doing. So this is great.
I wish my dad would have known more. You know, I wish we could go back 2 years and they'd have known in '79 that it caused cancer, because my dad would have made sure I was nowhere around any of that. Do you know what I mean? Who was to think a little bit of dust would make somebody sick? It's heartbreaking for my dad. I don't want to talk about that one. He takes it very hard. To think of losing me, it hurts him. I'm his oldest child, so.
It really hit me hard. It hit me so hard because we were so close. Shedding tears now. I wish we would have had more information back then.
I've seen that video a few times, and it never gets easy watching that. But it's an important message, and the type of messages we need to get out there. The final comments I want to make is the whole partnerships piece, and I just want to add, I've talked about a number of partnerships and successful partnerships that we have with organizations like the Safety Council and CNIB and Chambers and Federation of Labor. Some of the key partnerships that we have and long-standing partnerships are with the industry-funded safety associations. There are currently 7 industry-funded safety associations that represent 18 rate codes in the province. The construction, heavy construction, energy services, which is oil and gas, SASWA, which is healthcare, the Motor Safety Association, which are ag dealers, auto body shops, SASM, which is focused on manufacturing, and then Service Hospitality, the restaurant, hotel, and other services in the hospitality industry. These organizations have long-standing partnerships. It's really a partnership between WCB and the industry to try and really focus on critical health and safety issues in those industries. Over the years, we've seen phenomenal success. These are high-risk industries, oil and gas and manufacturing and healthcare. And for many, many years, we've seen the injury rate for these high-risk industries dropping faster than the province up until this last year. Similar to the provincial situation, the safety associations stalled a little bit in terms of injury rate reductions. You can see they went up I think safety associations went up 5%, while the non-safety association rate codes went up 2%. But we continue to work with them as partners to figure out what it is that we can all collectively do different. We've been in discussions for the last year and a half with all the safety associations about revising the policy, the Safety Association funding policy and related funding agreement. That should get changed and implemented, any changes implemented in 2019. And we'll keep working to make sure that all the rate codes and employers within those rate codes continue to be well served by those safety associations. They do a lot of work, a lot of training, the safety associations. They're fully dedicated. And like us, I think they're in the midst of reviewing some of what they're focused on and why. So with that, I'm now going to turn it over to Ray for...
Thank you, Phil. I'd just like to thank Gord Dobrowski, Larry Flowers, and Gary Hamlin, the board, for the opportunity to speak to you here today. I'd also like to congratulate Peter on his pending retirement, and Phil, little advice, be careful what you wish for as we move forward here. Before I get really going here, I'd like to talk a little bit about the relationship between the Ministry of Labour Relations and Workplace Safety, particularly the Occupational Health and Safety Division, and the board. In addition to funding the division 100%, we're also partners through the WorkSafe partnership, and we're, again, believers in Mission Zero. And I like to say that the division's mandate is to enforce the Saskatchewan Employment Act, and particularly the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations and other associated health and safety regulations. So we, in a way, enforce what is essentially a minimum standard, but we advocate in all cases for best practice and a change of safety culture. So with that said, hopefully this works here. I'll talk a little bit about the primary services or duties that the division undertakes. They fall into two categories predominantly, that of inspection and enforcement. So talk first about inspections. As Phil said, we have a priority employer or a targeted employer program. That is that we scrutinize the data of the 12% of employers that have had accidents within the last 5 years that represent 100% of the injuries that occur to workers. In other words, it's an idea around where there's smoke, there's fire. And this year, we conducted 3,158 inspections on those targeted employers. Depending on the size of the employer, say if it's a large employer like Walmart with 14 facilities, there would be a large number of inspections on those. If it's a smaller employer, say like the Yorkton Co-op, there might be 4 or 5. The idea behind it is that we want to work with those employers and address those things that are harming workers, and get them into a plan, get them into a program where they're addressing those things that are harming their workers and changing the way they work. The other group we have, of course, is complaint-driven. In that, we did 822. That's where a worker or perhaps another employer will phone in and comment about something they've seen, their sites or whatever, and of course we react to those. We try and react to them within 24 hours. Of course, the officers have discretion, and they conducted 936 officer-initiated inspections. These are the result of perhaps just driving by a site or receiving a tip or whatever reason, but it's done at their discretion. And of course, we have requirements under Section 7 for notifications, things like high-risk asbestos, extremely deep excavations, other high-hazard industry type things, where we did 502 inspections. So the total worksite visits for this year was 5,418. This was performed by 63 field staff, And it's a record for us. It's the highest ever. It's 38% higher than last year with an increase of 1,433 inspections, so we're rather proud of it. And this year, we're adding another 3 FTEs to the ministry. 2 of them will be field staff in the general safety area. So the next issue I want to talk about is enforcement. It begins, we have 2 types of enforcement. One is what we call summary offense ticketing. And back in July of 2014, there were changes made to the Summary Offences Procedures Act and the Summary Offences Regulations. This allowed OHS officers, and there were 12 of them that were designated by the minister as peace officers for the purposes of issuing tickets, to issue tickets on 12 offenses. And they're actually pretty simple. Fall protection, people fall off things. Safety in excavations, things fall on people. Safety around machinery, people get caught in. And around personal protective equipment. And of course, progress reports and accounting. In other words, an employer can't ignore us. They have to comply in some fashion. So looking at it, this year we've issued 26 tickets, with 23 of them being found guilty. 1's currently in progress and 2 have been stayed or withdrawn. Since inception of July 2014, we've had about a 90% success rate with these tickets. And they're used in cases where essentially we find repeat offense, where they've been written up before, but they're not complying. So it's further enforcement. And of course, last but not least, the division works with the Ministry of Justice in investigating serious injury or fatality. These are incidents that fall under provincial jurisdiction. They generally fall under Section 8 of the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations. Those would be incidents that result in a worker being admitted to hospital as an inpatient for 72 hours, or in the case of fatality. They're generally not investigated by another agency, say like the RCMP in the case of a highway traffic issue, or perhaps the National Transportation Safety Board in the case of an airline accident or something like that. And finally, the big part of this, you guys, and Justice keep reminding me of this, is the issue is deterrence. It's not punishment. So with that, I'll move on. We had 36 files sent to Justice, or 32 files sent to Justice this year. That number is down slightly, about 10%. And on top of that, 25 prosecutions initiated. Now, normally we have 1 dedicated Crown prosecutor. You start thinking about that, that's about 1 case every 2 weeks. And these cases they're pretty big cases, most of them. It's a lot of work for the prosecutors. So we took the step this year, with the board's support, of adding a 2nd prosecutor. Hopefully this will reduce the time that it takes to get a case into court. It will give quicker scrutiny and better service to all parties involved in it, and basically just improvement. So finally, total penalties this year, $1,447,100 on 19 convictions. And as you can see, the dollar value between this year and last year is nearly the same, but the number of actual convictions is down. So the size of the fines is generally rising. But that said, that discretion falls to a judge, and the judge normally looks at 2 real key factors. One is the size of the entity that they're dealing with, and the other is their record. And so, again, while we would like to see the fines higher and the deterrence greater, it falls to the hands of a justice. So with that said, I'll pass it on.
Thank you, Ray. Hello, everyone. My name is Mick Williams, and I'm the Vice President of Operations at WCB. And Peter spoke earlier about our corporate beliefs, and the belief we as an organization operate with is that if we improve in the 5 key areas that he highlighted in his slides, timeliness, quality, people, Mission Zero, and Financial, that we will improve our customers' experience. And so one of the places that the customers have experience with us is when the claim occurs. And when the claim occurs, then there is an opportunity for us and the need for us to interact with the worker, with the employer, and with our partners in healthcare. So one of the things we keep our eyes on as we're doing our work is, are we having the impact on our customer experience that we intend to have? And so the first thing I want to put up there is our survey results. I'll explain a little bit about how we do this. We use an independent agency to conduct these service surveys for both workers and employers. It's a common measurement tool is the name of the product, I guess, we use, and we conduct it twice annually with each customer group. It is a survey that's designed specifically for public service organizations, and it measures customer satisfaction levels through a series of questions. Some of you may have responded to these surveys in the past. So in 2018, just when we take a look at the injured worker survey, we ended up increasing our customer satisfaction level on this survey to 4.17. You see the target line there at 4.2, so we didn't quite hit the target on the worker side. On the employer side, we had slightly better results, 4.23, which slightly exceeded the target on there, and the trend is in the right direction on both of these. Having said that, we recognize that there's always a lot of opportunity for us to improve in this area. When we think about what maybe we had done that may have helped us create better results in the past year, I think this time last year when we were reporting out, we talked about our need to improve our accessibility, and that was a lot of what we were getting in our surveys, was that we needed to find ways to be more accessible for questions that our customers had. In our claims, a lot of the information that we exchange with each other is best served in person or over the telephone. We can exchange some electronically, but there is still a fairly high demand from the customer for some of that personal contact. So we took some measures to try and be more available for telephone contact, and we think that probably has driven a little bit of probably the single biggest contributor to some of the improvement we saw this past year. When we look at the information that comes in our survey right now, we think our next opportunity is, now that we're more accessible to be able to talk about this, now we want to get better at problem solving with our customers and being able to explain why we're doing what we're doing, and perhaps engaging in better conversations around whether that's the best next course of action for all parties. The other thing that we keep our eyes closely on is our durations. And durations for us is the average days paid per time loss claim. Over the past number of years, as you can see by the numbers on here, it's been challenging to not have these numbers keep creeping higher and higher. Our experience is similar to most jurisdictions across the country on that. And some of it probably has to do with any number of things, but certainly claims mix is in there somewhere, as we're getting better as a system at accommodating less serious injuries and probably converting a lot of what formerly would have been short time loss claims into no time loss claims. Some of that factors into this number. Another factor in it for us this past year is, while our psychological injury claims don't make up a large portion of the injuries we have, the duration of them is typically quite a bit higher than others. So they are increasing in terms of the mix that we have. You can see the numbers on here. In December of 2017, we had gained a few days in our durations. As of December 2018, we had actually given up a good portion of that, and year to date in 2019 we're at about that 41. All of January, February, and March, all three of those months were right around the 41 days mark. So we're really quite, Phil talked about us plateauing on the prevention side. We seem to be plateauing at a level on the duration side that's in that 41 days. So, and that's higher than what we have been in the past. So this is, for us, this is about adjusting our claims management practices to the reality that we're facing, which is that the claim is different than it used to be. How do we, what do we need to do in order to be able to manage these claims from a durations perspective and keep them at about the same or better duration levels than what we've been able to do in the past? So those are some of the challenges we're looking at, and with respect to the durations of claims and restoring the abilities of people who are affected by workplace injuries. So the kinds of things that we're looking at there are everything from taking a look at what is causing the delays in us processing claims. Things like, are we getting medical information in a timely fashion? Are we exchanging information with workers and employers in a timely way? Are there ways that we can improve our interactions with them? So there's kind of that, we call that, or you refer to that as taking a look at our process and looking at what delays do we have in our current process, how are those affecting our durations, and what can we do about them? And then there's the other part of it that I talked about a little bit earlier about, that we've got a different mix of claims that we're working with now. How do we learn more about them so that we can be intervening in better ways? And where we're looking, or where we're going to learn more about that is we're taking a look at Phil talked a little bit about the serious injuries. We're taking a look at our cohort of claims that are lasting longer than 6 months and seeing if there isn't a way that we can kind of predict better which of our claims are going to need more intervention and how do we intervene more quickly on those. So that's kind of where 2018 has brought us with our claims, and kind of a bit of a glance into what we're trying to do about it in the next while. So now I'm going to ask Ann Schultz, our CFO, to come up and talk about our financial results.
Thanks, Mick. So I'm going to be reviewing our 2018 financial results. As soon as I figure out how to advance this, here we go. WCB experienced a comprehensive loss in 2018 of $154 million compared to the comprehensive income in 2017 of $110 million. So the following slides will review the financial activity that resulted in this loss, and also the impact on WCB's funded position that Gord had mentioned earlier remained fairly strong at 115.2% at the end of 2018. Premium revenue, the first line on our statement of operations and other comprehensive income, is driven by industry payrolls and premium rates. In 2018, as previously mentioned, our premium rate was $1.19 and per $100 of assessable payroll, and this was a reduction from $1.24 in 2017. So even with the difficult economic conditions for some sectors, we did experience almost a 4% overall increase in assessable payrolls over 2017. Assessable payrolls, as mentioned by Phil, increased to $22.4 billion from $21.6 billion in 2017. Approximately 2% of that 3.7 or 4% increase in payrolls is attributable to the increase in the maximum insurable earnings that was effective January 1st, 2018. So in 2017, maximum insurable earnings were slightly over $76,000. This increased to slightly over $88,300 in 2018. Premium revenue was slightly below what we had budgeted, and that was due to the fact that we had estimated payrolls would be approximately $1 billion higher than actually what happened. Total expenses in 2018 were $368.5 million as compared to $321.6 million in 2017. This is an increase of almost $47 million. Claims costs are our biggest expense category and typically make up about 70% of our total claims costs. Claims costs in 2018 were $278.2 million, and they made up the majority of that $47 million increase in our costs by increasing $48 million more than the 2017 balance of $230 million. We'll discuss claims costs in more detail in a coming slide. Administration expenses, the net administration expenses at $50 million are an increase of about $4.2 million from 2017. So there was increases in salaries, amortization, and also the fact that the expenses, net administration expenses that show up on our statement of comprehensive income and loss are after we deduct things like we charge self-insured earners for administering their claims, as well as we take into an account an adjustment to the future costs to administer claims. It's actuarially determined, and that amount actually dropped by $1.1 million, so that impacted the net admin costs shown on this statement. Safety and prevention, as Phil and Ray spoke to, include the costs of the Occupational Health and Safety Program at the Ministry of Labour Relations and Workplace Safety, funds to safety associations, and Worker Safe Saskatchewan expenses. In 2018, there was an increase of approximately $1 million, and this was a result of increased WorkSafe expenses. The next line with respect to expenses is annuity interest. So after a worker is receiving long-term wage loss for 24 consecutive months, an amount equal to 10% of their wage loss benefit is set aside into a fund until that worker reaches age 65. This fund is meant to replace other pension or Canada pension income that the worker would not be contributing to while they are on benefits. These funds earn an interest rate, and we calculate that interest rate based on the 5-year actual average interest returns that we have. In 2018, the interest rate paid on those funds was 6% compared to the 9.8% in 2017. So that explains the decrease of over $4 million in that expense category for 2018. We'll get a little bit into investment returns in a following slide as well. So, sorry, I didn't mean to advance that. Legislated obligations contain expenses or include the expenses for the Office of the Workers Advocate and Committee of Review expenses. So in 2018, the WCB paid the ministry $1.3 million to fund the Workers Advocate Office. After the expenses, we recognize what's called our underwriting loss, so that's our premium revenue less expenses. And in 2018, that amount was $120 million loss as compared to $66 million in 2017. Again, the reason for that was the increase in claims costs. So investment income, the next line, is WCB's other main source of revenue. So our investment income is made up of both realized investment earnings, which are interest, dividends, and actual sales of the assets we hold. And we also have unrealized earnings or losses when the fair market value of assets is greater or less than what we paid for those assets. Investment income in 2018 was a negative $42 million compared to the positive returns we had in 2017 of $176 million. And the investment return for 2017 worked out to a negative 1.9% compared to the positive 9.8% in 2017. In 2018, we experienced significant fluctuation in investment market values in the last quarter of 2018. Within that $41.6 million loss, we experienced an unrealized loss of $126 million. So the investments we held at the end of the year or the change in that the results of quarter 4 resulted in that unrealized loss. We budget for investment income on an expected annual return of about 5%, and of course we fell short of that. On a positive note, the value that we lost in the fourth quarter of 2018 was more than recovered in the first quarter of 2019. Other comprehensive income includes the actuarial loss on employee benefits with respect to our closed defined benefit plan. So in 2018, that amount was a $600,000 loss compared to a gain that we had in the previous year. We'll discuss the impact of these financial results on the injury fund and the funding position in more detail in a coming slide. This slide compares our, or shows the relative proportions of our revenue sources in comparison to the total revenue for WCB. So as I mentioned earlier, with unrealized gains and losses on investments, the value or the amount of income we recognize can vary significantly. The gray lines represent investment income, and as markets go up and down, so will our investment income. In 2018, investment income actually was a negative contributor to total revenue in the amount of about 19%. We hold investments to ensure that we have enough assets to meet our future claims costs, and we'll get into that a bit more when I talk about the benefits liability. We make assumptions with respect to the long-term expected rate of return when valuing that benefits liability. The impact on WCB's funded position of the investment and loss in 2018 was mitigated by our funding policy, which removed those unrealized losses and gains, and the fact that we have a funding range of 105 to 120%, which allows WCB to absorb short-term fluctuations in investment income caused by market volatility. Investment income can be volatile. In the last 10 or 11 years, we've had negative investment returns. For example, 2008 was a really bad year with a minus 16% return on our investments. But we've also had some very positive years in the last 10 years. In 2013, we actually earned a positive 17.5%. So our 5-year average from 2014 to 2018 was approximately 6%, and it had a range of returns from the negative 1.9% in 2018 to the positive 9.8% that we earned in 2017. Premium revenue, as I mentioned earlier, is driven by industry payrolls and premium rates and tends to be more stable. So this slide is a revisit of our claims costs. So claims costs include short-term wage loss and long-term earnings, replacement, healthcare costs, vocational rehabilitation expenses, claims administration costs, and the adjustment to the benefits liability, which is the actuarial claims experience adjustment. Again, claims costs increased in 2018 to $278 million. Durations and the number of time loss claims are two drivers of the short and long-term compensation costs, and as Mick mentioned, durations increased in 2018 to almost 42 days. Healthcare inflation remains our greatest risk, as healthcare inflation typically runs ahead of normal inflation. In 2018, we experienced those we experienced increases in healthcare costs related to inflation, and there was also an increase in the utilization of tertiary and secondary treatment services. Vocational rehabilitation expenses include costs to return injured workers to meaningful employment have remained stable. As I mentioned earlier, claims administration is an actuarially determined amount to administer the claims that are in the system to the end of those claims. So the benefits liability, which is on our statement of financial position, is an actuarially determined amount that would settle the cost of all claims that are in the system at the end of the year. We must ensure that we have enough financial assets to honor all those costs for all the claims in the system to the end of the claim. So in the case of an injured worker that is very young, those costs could run out as long as 50 years or more. The benefits liability adjustment is the change in that benefit liability amount that the actuaries determine from 2017 to 2018. Again, it increased 52.5 million. So the benefit liabilities at the end of 2018 were 1.28 billion as compared to 1.23 billion in 2017. The increase in the benefits liability for 2018, again, was related to medical inflation, the increase in the maximum insurable earnings, increased expected health care costs from increasing treatment and utilization levels, an increase in psychological claims, and the continuing pattern, as Mick talked about, of claims staying in the system longer. This slide shows the relative percentage of our expenses. Expenses tend to be more stable than what happens with our revenue sources. 2018, as I mentioned, claims costs included that adjustment for the benefits liability of $52 million and pushed up the relative proportion of claims costs to 76% of our total expense structure. The other bar that I'd like to draw your attention to is administration expenses. In 2018, they comprised 14% of our total expenses. We compare ourselves to other WCB boards, and the Association of Workers' Compensation Boards of Canada gather information with respect to costs and publish it in the key statistical measures. In 2017, which is the most recent year that that data is available from the Association of Workers' Compensation Boards of Canada, Saskatchewan had the 4th lowest administration cost per time loss claim. As well, the AWCBC also does another measure of administrative efficiency, and that is the administrative cost per $100 of assessable payroll. And in 2017, Saskatchewan had the 3rd lowest cost against that measure. So the WCB legislation requires that WCB be 100% funded to ensure security of benefit. The legislation allows for reserves to ensure financial stability and predictability of premiums. The funding policy sets a range for a reasonable funded position based on actuarially determined risk modeling, which considers the makeup of WCB's investments, our benefits liability makeup, what kind of claims are in our benefits liability, what kind of injuries, all kinds of factors that they look at with respect to that in terms of what our benefits liability is composed of, and economic assumptions. As I mentioned earlier, investments are recorded at fair market value on the statement of financial position, and the change in the unrealized gains and losses is is recorded through investment income. This means that volatile investment markets can produce swings in our operating surpluses and the injury fund. WCB's funding policy removes unrealized gains and losses from the injury fund for the purpose of calculating the funding percentage to lessen the volatility in the funding ratio. The calculation then remains consistent year over year, and funding percentage is not subject to significant swings in the fair market value of investments. It's like the equity in your home. You only really realize, the value of your house when you sell it and the money's in the bank. The funding percentage for 2018 was 115% under the funding policy and is within the targeted range of 105 to 120%. So our injury fund, after recognizing the loss we experienced this year, was just under $400 million. We removed the unrealized gains of $171 million to come to an injury fund, removing those unrealized gains, sort of the cash in the bank of $228 million. We then take the ratio of that amount against our significant liabilities, which is the benefits liability and the annuity fund payable, to come to the 15.2%. So that's how we arrive at our funded position. I'll now turn it back to Peter for the 2019 outlook.
Thank you, Anne. So this next section on the outlook, first of all, just sort of as I indicated at the beginning, just drills down a little bit further into what our strategic objectives are for the strategic planning year. So we run a 3-year planning cycle and update that annually. So the strat plan that's actually on our website, might be on your tables too, is for the period from 2019 to 2021. So in conjunction with cascading those True North metrics down into actionable items, the strategic objectives we have set for the 3-year period fall into the 3 categories, which come directly out of our vision and mission statement. So first of all, we focus on Mission Zero. We want to prevent injuries, fatalities, and suffering in the workplaces. Then we move into the restorabilities, where we want to restore the individual's abilities to function, including their ability to return to work. And the third one is around the culture of continuous process improvement. Again, creating this culture for our employees to put them in the best position possible to be engaged in looking for ways to improve our processes to better serve our customers. So our goals, objectives with respect to each of these strategic themes is with respect to Mission Zero, by December 31st, 2021, we want to see a 30% reduction in workplace injuries and fatalities, and we want to see 0 injuries with respect to our own staff. With respect to restorabilities, we would like to see by December 31st, 2021, that we'll be returning 95% of injured workers back to function within 6 months, as indicated by our 6-month persistency measure. So as Mick alluded to, while we are looking at durations as an indicator of the severity of injuries, when it comes to how well we're doing with respect to the restoration of folks' abilities, we're looking at something called the persistency measure. And the persistency measure simply tells us how many workers or what percentage of workers remain on wage loss payments at different intervals of time. So we have picked the 6-month interval. So by December 31st, 2021, we want to see 95% of workers who have had their function restored and are no longer reliant on wage loss payments 6 months post-injury, which is a fairly significant stretch for us in terms of improving of where we are today. The culture of continuous process improvement, we want to see our engagement scores, which are currently around 70%, I think, increase to 90% by the end of 2021. So these are the 3 kind of strategic themes over the next 3 years that we have focused on and have cascaded down into the organization for the purposes of development of operational objectives. So if we went one layer down here into, closer to the front line work that's being done, you would see even more granularity with respect to how we intend on moving these particular 3 strategic objectives within the next 12 months. The next part we get into is we're required to actually give you a look into what we see the potential future being for our organization from a financial perspective. And of course, these are based on certain assumptions with respect to our revenue and our expenses. With respect to the revenue side, of course, on the premiums, we're assuming that the premium is going to stay where it is in 2019 through 2020, so at $1.17. We are, however, forecasting an increase in assessable payroll by 4% in 2019 and 2% in 2020. The difference being the 2020 forecast is based strictly on the increase in the maximum wage amount, whereas we do have a bit of an economic increase built into the 4% expectation for 2019. So again, very conservative estimates. I'm not sure whether Anne pointed this out or not when she was talking about our premium revenue, but we saw actually a 3.7% increase in payroll between 2018 and 2019. 2% of that was driven by the increase in the maximum wage. The other 1.7 was actually true economic growth. So while there were certain industries that struggled with respect to increases in their payroll, overall we actually did see an increase in the payroll reported to us, although not at the same level that we were expecting. With respect to the investment income, our assumption, Anne talked about us needing to earn a certain return on premiums collected in order to pay future claims costs. Our actuarial liability calculations require that we earn 5.5% on our investments over the long term. And so for purposes of our projections, we have used the assumption of 5.5% return on investment for both 2019 and 2020. As Anne pointed out, first quarter of 2019 was a very, very good quarter. We recovered everything plus what we lost in the last quarter of 2014. So we've probably already exceeded the 5.5% return, but let's not forget what happened fourth quarter of 2018. So this can change very quickly, and accordingly we are putting in a conservative estimate in terms of the returns that our investments will earn over the forecast period. Our claims costs, we have built in reductions in our time loss rate, while as Phil reported, we saw a flattening off of our time loss injury rate in 2018 or 17, and actually an increase in 2019. We're being optimistic that we will see a reduction in the time loss injury rates in both 2019 and 2020, down to 1.67 and 1.51 respectively. Durations, we're expecting just to hold flat at around the 41-day mark. With respect to the inflationary costs, we're expecting about a 3.5% increase in claims costs, with the exception of healthcare costs, which, as Anne indicated, is our fastest growing cost component within our compensation costs. We're forecasting a 5.25% increase in those costs over 2019 and 20. Our administration costs, no salary increases for 2019. Our other costs, inflation, we're just expecting them to grow between 2 and 3%. Annuity interest, we're assuming the rate of return, the 5-year average, as Anne indicated, at 6%, will hold through 2019 and 20. We are budgeting, estimating, anticipating increases in occupational health and safety of 1.75% in each year, and 1.7% increases in safety association funding. And with respect to our legislative obligations, a 1.75% for the Workers' Advocate's Office. So when we roll that up into our budget for 2019 and what we're forecasting for 2020, you'll see that in each of the years, while we are expecting positive investment income as opposed to negative, which is what we saw in 2018, we are expecting to record smaller net losses in both 2019 and 20, roughly $10 million in 2019 and $7 million in 2020. When we convert this into our forecast of what projected funded position might be, we see slight decreases in our funding position from the current 115% down to about 115% today, to about 113% in 2019, and then a further decrease down to about 112% in 2020. The other part of our budgeting process are our capital expenditures. We are forecasting a rather modest increase, about a $400,000 increase in our capital expenditures year over year. All of these capital costs are related to our IT systems, whether it be continued maintenance or system development or enhancements to existing systems is primarily what goes into our capital expenditure budget. So what are our challenges moving forward? As Phil already indicated, and Gord referenced in his remarks, seeing increases in the number of injuries and the number of fatalities really is somewhat concerning to us. And I think it's critically important for all of us in this room, all those watching, and for every workplace in Saskatchewan to continue to lead the way in terms of changing the culture of this province from one that just sort of accepts injuries as a way of life to one that proactively strives to actually reduce and eliminate injuries in this province, with the belief that we can prevent all injuries, because every one of them has a predictable element to it. We can't predict when they're going to happen, but we can predict that if certain precautions are not taken, if certain steps are not taken, that an injury will in fact occur. And so leading that cultural and behavioral change, you know, I continue on a daily basis to see people talking on their cell phones while they're driving, notwithstanding that we've had distracted driving laws in this province for years. And it's a behavioral, attitudinal issue that continues to allow us to take those additional risks that not only put ourselves at risk, but put everyone else on the road at risk. And we have to continue to work together to change that attitude, to change those behaviors, and improve the health and safety of this province. We will continue to focus on improving our processes for the purposes of adding value for our customers. And that's a huge and challenging initiative that we have taken on. And of course, stabilizing our investment returns. Since 2014, we have been looking at, so we hold today just over $2 billion in investments. And our intention with respect to holding those investments at a minimum is to earn the 5.5% that we need in order to fund these liabilities. When we look at this from an investment policy perspective, what we're seeking to do is reduce the volatility in the investment returns while maintaining the minimum return of 5.5%. And since 2014, we took very aggressive steps, if you will, by undergoing several different studies by our actuaries and investment consultants to assist us in determining what asset mix we should have. So we have currently funds invested in Canadian equities and U.S. equities and real estate and bonds and mortgages, and the equities are split between small capitalized and large capitalized, global, non-North American, and on it goes. The board has decided through the investment committee to undertake another optimization study to again look at, is there anything else that we should be doing, any other asset classes that we should be looking at to try and reduce some of the volatility. A bit of a wake-up call for us, I think, in terms of Q4 of 2018. And so I expect that optimization report to come from our investment consultant sometime in June. Unfortunately, I won't get to see what great things they have to say. However, I know that the investment committee, as it has in the past, will continue to apply the due diligence that's necessary in order to make the best decisions in terms of providing adequate and stabilizing those investment returns over the long term. Of course, number one focus, the number one belief that we need to continue to maintain is that even one injury is too many, and that Mission Zero is in fact achievable. And thank you all for coming today. I think, Gord, we're going to turn it back to you and perhaps take some questions.
For sure. Thank you, Peter.